Elise Labott, and I'm here with Tom Steyer. And this is the Us in the World Presidential Candidate Interview Series. We're sponsored by a broad coalition of nonprofit organizations, and we're here to ask the candidates their views on the challenges and opportunities facing the United States beyond its borders. Mr. Steyer, thanks so much for joining us.
Elise, it's great to be here, and honestly, please call me Tom.
Okay, thank you. Let's get started. So the United States is the world's richest and most powerful nation in the world. What is your view of the U.S. role in the world today?
Look, I think that the United States has done best on the world stage when we've been a value-driven country leading a coalition of democracy and freedom-loving countries from around the world. That's when we've had the most accomplishment. That is the place where we shine. And Mr. Trump's America First policy of everything being bilateral, everything being confrontational, and with absolutely no values attached to it, to me is a strategic and moral blunder of epic proportions that can't work and can only make Americans less safe and less prosperous.
I want to get to your values-driven ideas in a bit, but what is the U.S. responsibility to the rest of the world?
The U.S. responsibility is to stand up for our values and to protect American citizens. And so I believe that we've fallen into this idea that we're the world's policeman, that on a bilateral basis we will rely on the strongest military in history to enforce our wishes. And frankly, I think that's a terrible mistake. I think that it's time for us to recognize that it has failed, that Iraq has been a failure, that Afghanistan has been a failure, and that whole way of responding is disproportionate. It doesn't reflect our values, and it hasn't worked for Americans to make us safer or richer.
So how would your budget reflect those priorities and values if you were president?
Look, as we all know, we spend over $700 billion a year on defense.
That's right.
That dwarfs every other non-entitlement spending. It's gone up $100 billion under Mr. Trump. So whether you use that number to compare to what we spend on diplomacy and development, or whether you use it to compare to what the federal government spends on education, you can see that it's dramatically bloated compared to every other comparison.
So what does it mean you talk about reinvigorating the State Department. What does that mean? Are you talking about increasing foreign aid with the decrease in military spending? And how, in that sense, do you project strength?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I don't believe that America's image in the world is supposed to be the empire in the Star Wars movie. The country in the world with the strongest military that has no willingness or ability to negotiate, no willingness or ability to put together coalitions of like-minded countries, no willingness or ability to really even do any analysis. It's simply, we have the strongest military in the world. You will do what we want, or we will attack you and take you out.
Right, but you know that any kind of diplomacy is really the most effective when it's backed by strength. So if you're talking about kind of reducing, that military prowess, how does the U.S. project strength that then will lead countries to want to engage in diplomacy?
We spend so much more than any other country on defense. I don't think there's a question about who has the strongest military in the world. That really isn't the question.
So you're saying we don't have to show it?
The question I would ask you is, are we safer when we're the people with the strongest military that everybody distrusts and hates? Or are we safest when we're the good guys in the world who stand up for what's right, who have allies who actually support us? Look, let's go back to Iran for a second. After the U.S. killed Mr. Soleimani, ask yourself not whether we were right or wrong. Let's not even go there yet. Ask yourself how many of our traditional allies came out to support us. There were countries from around the world condemning us. Okay, they're countries who we disagree with, who might condemn us under all circumstances. My question is, how many of our traditional allies came out and said, no, what the United States did was right? I can answer you, none.
So you're talking then about an increase in kind of diplomacy and development spending to compensate for that reduction in military defense.
There's a sense that somehow diplomacy, negotiation, values are somehow soft and not powerful. Actually, they're the most powerful thing in the world. When people think about how we won the Cold War, did we win the Cold War by having stronger weapons than the Soviet Union? Or did we win the Cold War because actually we were standing for freedom and prosperity? And that as people around the world realized that what the Soviet Union stood for was a very mighty military, empty stores where there was nothing you could buy, long lines, a failed consumer economy, really a system that didn't work for people. And they could go get on their TV or on their phone and see, wow, the United States is a place I'd like to live. Ask yourself, did we win the Cold War because of Ronald Reagan spending all that money on the Star Wars defense? Or did we win because people around the world realized, wow, the Soviet Union is promising something that is absolutely terrible, that is failing from around the world?
I think it was probably a combination of both. But let's move to, how would the U.S. military footprint be different under your administration? The way you are talking, clearly it would be much different.
Well, let me put it to you this way. How many trillions of dollars
have
we wasted in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Okay,
and so when we think about actually military action, the question is, why are we doing this all by ourselves? Is it all of a sudden we're the only country in the world that believes in freedom and democracy? Are we the only country in the world that believes we should be, whose citizens are under threat from totalitarian regimes? No. The question is why we act as if that's true.
So how would it be different under your administration?
I would start with values. I would assume that when we act in the world, we're acting first and foremost to protect American citizens. As Commander-in-Chief, you have to do that. But the second question you have to ask is, if we're standing up for rights around the world, where are the other people who share our values? Where is the coalition of nations that's willing to stand up and do the right thing?
Do you think it's worth putting U.S. forces in risk when American values are at stake, or the security of our allies, but our direct security is not?
Well, let me put it to you this way. The job of a commander-in-chief, first and foremost, is to protect the citizens of the United States. Secondly, we have treaties that say that we will go to support our allies if they're attacked. So your question is, under certain circumstances, we absolutely have to defend our allies. But there is a real question here about everything. You ask a series of questions about military power. Why don't we talk about actually the biggest international problem in the world, which is climate?
Okay.
Okay. How does the military play into climate?
How does the military play in climate?
If the military starts to play into climate, that means we've lost. If the word military is used in terms of combating climate change, we've gotten to a place that we should never get to. The way we have to win in climate is doing exactly what I'm saying. We have to lead a coalition of countries together to solve our climate crisis. It's a common crisis. It cannot be solved by the United States of America. And if we don't have moral leadership, financial leadership, technological leadership, and commercial leadership, it can't happen, and there's no other country that can do it. So here is the number one international issue where all of our military spending doesn't matter.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So you spoke about climate diplomacy. How would you use U.S. foreign assistance and diplomacy to confront the climate change? And would you condition foreign aid on sound climate policies?
Look, I think this is the number one issue confronting us. I think it's the number one issue confronting us internationally. Every decision has to be made in the context of we have a climate crisis that we have to solve together. They're not doing us a favor.
Right.
They're doing themselves a favor.
Would you condition foreign aid on sound climate policies?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I think that's too simple a question. Do I think that every decision about foreign aid, about diplomacy, has to be taken in the context of climate? Yes. But you're asking me, is there a straightforward quid pro quo? And what I'm saying, every decision has to be made in that context. But you're asking me a much simpler question. And my answer is, I don't know, because it's a broader context than just a quid pro quo. So when you're thinking about trade policy, that has to be done in the context of climate. When you're talking about aid policy, that has to be done in the context of climate. But you asked me, is there a straightforward quid pro quo? And I said, I don't know. That's too simple a question. That's not actually the way to think about this.
So how do you apply foreign assistance and diplomacy to confront the challenge?
People have to understand that this is our number one priority, that they have to be coming along with us. But the other question, when you think about climate, step back for 1 second. How many countries, and there was something like 196 countries that are part of the Paris Climate Accord. I don't think any of them are living up to their promises, and if they do, it's not enough anyway. But my point is, if you actually look at the number of countries who are significant producers of greenhouse gases. It is not 196 countries, I promise you. It's like 20. So when we really think about climate, we're going to have to focus on those 20 countries and talk to them about what they can do and what we need to do together.
How do you kind of match that enthusiasm for a similar commitment to helping poorer countries who contribute the least but are the most effective? We're talking about adaptation, right? I mean, how do you ensure that climate solutions aren't just dealing with kind of the rich and the biggest emitters, but also address the disproportionate impacts of climate?
We are going to have to be in a different position with regards to countries around the world and climate, and there's no question about it. And so we're going to have to do this as a coalition, and we're going to have to give people the ability to develop in a way that doesn't emit greenhouse gases, doesn't destroy the climate, leaves us all safe. And so that's going to mean, that's why I said we have to lead morally, technologically, financially, and commercially. It's going to have to be a broad effort.
What kinds of support can the U.S. to provide to countries and regions experiencing record levels of internal displacement caused by climate, for instance?
Well, let me put it to you this way. If we get to the place where the UN warns us we can get to, which is 2 billion climate refugees around the world, no one has enough money for that. We don't have enough money for that. Neither does anyone else. Neither does the world collectively. You're asking me questions about money. We're not just talking about money. We're talking about 2 billion human beings who have to move because they cannot live where they were brought up because it's unsafe because the climate has changed. That is a human problem of proportion that is bigger than any problem in human history. You know, we had 5 million refugees from Syria, partially based on climate and a gigantic drought that forced them to the cities, and then political issues within the city, particularly around water, forced them to move to Europe and roiled the entire world. Okay, just to be clear, 2 billion is 400 times as many as 5 million. 5 million roiled the world. We're talking 400 times as many people, okay? So when we talk about climate, my point is this. If we get there, we're in a place that no one understands. The whole point is not to get there. And for every one of these countries, it's not just in our interest, it's in China's interest, it's in India's interest, it's in Brazil's interest.
I understand.
Turkey's interest.
I'm trying to understand, you know, once you put this coalition together, you know, what do you do? I mean, for instance, you said on your first day that you would, in office if elected, you would impose a climate emergency. You would declare climate change a national emergency.
It is.
What does that look like, a national emergency?
Internally, it looks like the president, me, saying, here is the schedule for us to move from fossil fuel-based electricity generation to clean energy generation. Here is the schedule for us to move away from producing gasoline-powered cars. Here is the schedule for this country to rebuild its buildings so they're more energy efficient. Here is the schedule in terms of how we're going to do drilling in the United States or allow export of fossil fuels. It's a series of rules that are going to force private industry to change what they're doing fast but manageably in a way that will produce millions of jobs, that is going to be better from a health standpoint, specifically environmental justice, specifically clean up air and water in black and brown communities where this society concentrates its poisons. But we're going to get going. But the other point is this. Elise, think for 1 second. You and I are now the State Department of the United States. We are going to meet with the leaders of India.
Right.
We have to convince them, no more coal plants, we're all moving to clean energy together. We haven't declared a state of emergency. We're going along as the highest producers per capita in the world of greenhouse gases, and over time, the people who've contributed the most to greenhouse gas emissions in human history. What do we say? Do we have any diplomatic, do we have any moral standing to ask India to change what it's doing?
Good point.
However, if we've declared a state of emergency,
right,
and we're on a schedule, and we're doing everything we can, including producing the technology, and we're willing to support them in the ways that I said for them to move to clean energy, which is much better for them. Now, think about the meeting we can have.
I'd like to move on from climate. Beyond climate, what are the most urgent international crises facing the United States? We've discussed multiple threats that don't necessarily respond to traditional security policies, included climate change. So let's talk about how you address rising authoritarianism and the use of rapidly advancing technologies. I mean, beyond climate, what are the biggest threats to you?
Our most important international relationship is China, and it's very fraught. It's fraught on a number of vectors. You know, we have huge trade issues with China.
Right.
I've done business in China for decades. I've been to China multiple times. I've met with government officials, big business people, and I have a lot of Chinese friends. Do I know that they steal our intellectual property? Heck yes. I've talked to them about it. I don't think it, I know it. Do I know that they close markets to American companies against the orders of the World Trade Organization? Of course I do. I don't think it. They've told me how they do it. There's no question. Should we be pushing back on that? 100%. Are we rooting for China to fail? No. China is our most important relationship. We are tied to them. This world is going like this, and has been going like this, and it's going to continue to go like that. We cannot separate ourselves from China. We do not want China to fail. We want them to succeed fairly and in a way that helps us, doesn't hurt us.
Well, here's a
So that's a change. We're not an enemy.
We're a friend. You call them a frenemy.
We're a frenemy.
Okay.
We have real issues where we think they're doing the wrong thing,
okay,
but we also depend on each other. And there are many things, including climate, that we can only solve together.
Right.
So we can't isolate them. We can't have them disappear. We can't separate ourselves from China. We have to work within the relationship.
Okay, so let's talk about that. You talked very passionately about a values-driven foreign policy, and how do you balance that with working with China at the same time? How do you address their human rights records on Uyghurs, for instance? What if they say to you, "Sure, I'm willing to make a big landmark deal with you on climate change, but give us a pass on the Uyghurs"?
Here's what I'd say: it's not a bilateral question. That's my whole point. Is you're acting as if it's China and the United States. That's exactly the question.
They're the two greatest powers in the world. I mean,
but we're standing up for rights. The United States is not the policeman of the world. If we can't stand publicly with a coalition of other democracy and freedom-loving countries, let me ask you this: why not? Why is it that we're standing alone? Where are our traditional allies? Where are the other people who share our values? Where is the coalition that actually has been the basis for American international success for decades? That's the question I'm asking you, and that's the question I asked Mr. Trump. Since when did this become a bilateral confrontation backed up by the American military, as opposed to an international coalition talking about values together?
It does sound, though, that you're prioritizing climate a little bit over some of these other concerns. And that's, I think some of your critics have said that,
Like which concerns?
Like human rights, like intellectual property theft.
Intellectual
property
theft is a specific
some of their military,
issue that
their
we need to go after very
region,
specifically. Look and see. What Mr. Trump did about intellectual property theft was to raise tariffs and then have the Chinese raise tariffs back on us. It wasn't a direct approach. He did it bilaterally. He didn't have a coalition. He didn't work through the existing channels. Yes, and it didn't work. And it's not going to work. So when we think about intellectual property theft, let's go after intellectual property theft. And let's do it with all the countries that China steals intellectual property from. We're not the only country. Why are we not standing up directly for what's right? And why is there no coalition when we talk about democracy? Why is it that the United States can't pull together a coalition to stand up for the values of freedom? Why is that?
I get your point, but I think in a lot of these things, the international community looks for the U.S. to lead in terms of, cracking down on political repression by authoritarian regimes, killing of journalists around the world,
of course they
harassment.
Do. Of course they do. But let me say this. One of my good friends is a Canadian diplomat. What she told me is, the way it stands now, we have a team. The captain of the team, the United States of America, has left the field. Doesn't exist.
Okay.
So what you're talking about actually doesn't exist.
I understand, but what I'm asking you is, if there's a new captain,
there has to be a new captain.
Okay, if there's a new captain, what's the new captain's playbook here?
The new captain's playbook is exactly what I'm saying. Is we do have to lead. but we have to lead a coalition of other countries. If you look at what worked in Iran, it was actually a coalition of our allies going to Iran, a country we don't agree with that has been antithetical to our values for a long time, but where we actually went and negotiated with them and used diplomacy and economic sanctions to convince them to give up their nuclear ambitions. And it worked. It was real. It was diplomacy, it was negotiation, it was coalition, it was values-driven, it made Americans safer.
Let me ask you about immigration. A lot of the migration is coming from Central America, as you know, and you've spoken about Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. How do you deal with the root causes of migration like poverty and violence? You've said creating better living conditions in Central America is connected to decreasing.
Well, let's go a little further, Elise. You won't like the answer. There's a huge climate problem in Central America.
We've gotten to climate. Let's talk about some of these other root causes.
They're all connected.
I understand.
And so when you look at why people are leaving, they're leaving because they're fleeing violence, they're fleeing poverty, and they're fleeing climate. And so the question is, what are we going to do about all of those things?
What are we going to do?
The answer is we're going to actually go and help these countries address their root causes. That, in fact, if those countries stabilize, it's not like people in Honduras want to leave their home. They want to leave the violence. They want a chance to have a decent life for their families. They want to, they're having huge problems there. To the extent we help them with their problems, people will stay there.
What, if elected, what steps would you take to align U.S. immigration policy with American values? As you say, do you support a path for citizenship for the 11 million immigrants without permission and others under protected status?
Yes. Look, it's somewhere between 11 and 12 million people.
Okay.
They've lived here an average of 15 years. They pay taxes, their kids go to school. They don't get benefits. It's an open secret. This government is not telling the truth. Everybody knows they're here. That's a huge number of people. They're living in the shadows without any legal documentation. I'd give them legal status and a path to citizenship.
What about refugees? The Obama administration, as you know, had an average of about 110,000 refugees. This year, the presidential determination was low, or last year was lowered to 18,000.
Right.
How many would you admit?
Look, I think the Obama administration had an attitude towards immigration and towards refugees that was reasonable. Mr. Trump has a problem with non-white people. He has a problem with non-white people coming up from our southern border. He has a problem with non-white people coming to the United States, full stop. This isn't about immigration, this is about race. And let's be clear, he is using immigration as a front for talking about race and the fact that he's worried about non-white people and dislikes them and wants to stop any more of them from coming to the United States of America. As I like to say, we don't have a wall on the Canadian border. We don't.
True.
And so what's really going on here? He's making a racist statement. He said, we're out of room. That's ridiculous. That is literally one of his many lies. This country has been built by millions of people for centuries fleeing persecution, violence, and poverty. And they have come here to work hard, make America stronger, and have a better life. So in answer to your question, since when did that stop? Did that stop because all of a sudden Mr. Trump didn't like the color of the skin of the people coming here? Yes. So my question is, isn't it not true that America is made stronger by immigrants coming here? Yes, it is. It has always been true.
Well,
can we control our borders?
No doubt.
Yes, we can. But since when did we get this idea that torturing children is part of America's values? It's no part of any value that I've ever heard. Since when is committing crimes against humanity an American value? Never. What he's done is wrong and it's racist, and people have to stand up against it on that basis. We can talk about immigration, we can control our borders. That's not what he's doing. He's making a political point, and he's using racism to try and get himself reelected and for political reasons. And what he's doing is deeply wrong, and he's a liar.
Let's move on to gender. How would you ensure that our foreign and domestic policies not just protect sexual and reproductive rights here at home, but around the world? If we can expand it a little, I think that issues of women, women of color, LGBTQ, transgender rights, I think it's part of the whole panoply of issues that.
Elise, you weren't the person who was giving me a hard time for saying we're supposed to be value-driven in our foreign policy.
Okay, I wasn't giving you a hard time. I don't give you a hard time. I'm wondering what your policies would be. I mean, what is a policy for dealing some of these issues under a Steyer administration?
So let's take a step back. I wear a African belt every day, and I wear it for a reason. Besides the fact that I think it looks good, which I actually do.
It does.
I know that, but I wear it for a reason, and that's this. I was over in Kenya looking at schools for girls supported by Americans. Girls around the world don't get educated to the same extent boys do. I mean, very broadly, that's true. I think that societies decide that the boys are going to be the leaders, and therefore they get them much. Yes, it is. And that's why I wear the belt. My point is this. You're asking me what the policies would be. When girls get educated to the same extent as boys, everything gets much better. And it's a soft thing. But actually, it's an incredibly powerful thing across virtually every vector of success within those countries and with their relationship to the United States and the world. So you're asking me what would be a policy. From my standpoint, believe it or not, the education of girls around the world is one of the most powerful forces, might be the single most powerful force for good in the 21st century. So you're asking me about what are we going to do to change their internal policies in terms of gender equality and LGBTQ equality, and I'm telling you that the education of girls changes everything within those countries, and it's a pure good. And it's probably a better way, it's a positive way, and it's probably a better way to achieve all the positive things you want in the real world by just doing some good, and the ripple effects are dramatic, powerful, and across the board.
You said that if elected, you would create a special envoy position within the State Department to make sure we're protecting LGBTI rights, or to make that a priority. What does that look like?
Look, one of the things that we stand for in the United States, and that I personally take incredibly seriously, is treating human beings as full human beings. And so I think it's really important for the world to know that the United States stands with LGBTQ individuals and with that community around the world, because if you want to find a group of people who are maligned, attacked, in danger, that's probably, on a worldwide basis, the group that suffers the most. And I think it's important for the United States to be standing up for the rights of people around the world in coalition with our allies, and making it clear what we stand for, and that it's important for the safety and prosperity of Americans, but also for the heart and soul of Americans to do the right thing. Here's a perfect example.
You've been a businessman, a very successful one, but you also talk about, kind of people over profits.
Yeah.
Multinational corporations are using tax havens, as you know, draining
Yes.
resources for public services and, increasing inequality at the same time, dodging taxes, if you will. How would you eliminate these kind of loopholes and remedy them?
Change the rules.
To allow companies not put profits over people?
We have corporations paying way too little tax. There are plenty of tax loopholes in the United States of America. They didn't just get there. Somebody pushed for them. It's clear where we are with the biggest corporations in America paying an average of 11% of tax on their income. That is dramatically too low.
What's your view? What is your range, do you think?
Look, it should be twice that, at least. Look, there's something that's gone wrong here. These corporations own the government. This is my whole point. There's a reason we are where we are. We have a corrupt system where corporations have bought the government, and it's not trying to serve the American people. Yes, and you can see
or
it.
Or people around the world.
Excuse me?
Or people around the world.
Well, the government of the United States is supposed to serve the people of the United States. We're value-driven. We have values. We support positive values around the world. But the government of the United States is supposed to be dealing with the people of the United States.
I understand, but we just spoke about how when companies are going overseas, they're kind of draining resources from some of these countries and then avoiding paying taxes on them. So that's kind of creating this whole circle and cycle of inequality around the world, right?
Yes, but what we're talking about here is whether United States companies are paying, and companies in general are paying their fair share of taxes here. Those are the taxes we control. We can control that. And so the question is, do we close tax loopholes for corporations? We have to do that. They are going to push back very hard. They just got the Republicans to give them the biggest tax windfall in history at the expense of the American people, that the Republicans are going to try to pay for by taking away support for American people in terms of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security.
I have one more question, if you wouldn't mind, a quick lightning round of fun questions.
Fine.
How would your, we talk a lot about these global issues, but how would your policy shape the lives of 1 in 10 people in the world who are living in extreme poverty?
So funny. There's an issue about supporting other countries through development. And the United States has a long tradition of doing that and will continue to do that. It's a checkered history, in my opinion. It hasn't been wildly successful. The question is, how, I was just talking to you about things that I think actually will make a dramatic difference for people around the world. Will we continue to make sure that people don't starve to death? Of course, we'll be part of the coalition of countries that make sure that people don't starve to death around the world. Will we, in fact, push to get women to be better educated, which changes take a look at the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh.
Yes.
People know what a success it was. Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
What people don't realize is that more than 90% of the borrowers of that microfinance bank were women.
Yes.
So when we look around the world and see what we really need to do, why don't we do the things that have really worked, which include educating and supporting women? Why don't we look at the real issues that are going to actually devastate at least 2 billion people in the world, which is called climate? When you really look around the world about how we can actually make substantial changes by just doing the right thing that will have ripple effects for hundreds of years and make us the good guys, why don't we do those things?
I'm still, maybe you can help me, I'm still a little confused as to the balance between the values, interests, and being able to do all these things and building coalitions. I mean, values and coalitions are not going to actually get the job done. I mean, a lot of these countries are saying, what's in my interest? And that isn't necessarily,
we're going to have to back it up
this isn't always necessarily values, right? I mean, countries are also looking at their own interests.
Always. Yes, so are we. Yes, I understand that. But unless we have a value system and a strategy for what we're trying to accomplish, then we're just randomly behaving. That's what Mr. Trump does. He doesn't have a strategy and he doesn't have values. My question is, when we're dealing with a country, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to accomplish?
Well, some people might say, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And sometimes your values are right, but it doesn't help you to be effective necessarily.
Let me put it to you this way. When you're wrong, the ripple effects go forever. When you behave unethically, the ripple effects go forever. If you can't be a trusted partner who tells the truth, then how do you expect to accomplish anything in any sphere? So when you say, do you want to be right or you want to be effective? Let me answer you this way. If you're not honest, if you're not trusted, how are you going to be effective in any scheme? If that's what you're doing, then every single action, transaction, relationship is a one-off.
I'm just saying that some countries don't necessarily, lead with their values. They lead with, like China, for instance, leads with their interests. A lot of countries in the Middle East are not leading with their values.
And that's why China can never lead. That's why they can never lead. Because no one will ever trust them, because they shouldn't, because they're making it clear they don't lead with their values. If you ask me, when I say the only person who can lead the world on climate is us, China can never lead the world on climate.
All right.
No one believes when they're saying something, they're saying anything except we're going to do what's right for China. That takes away all of their leadership and moral authority. The United States of America is an idea about freedom and justice and equality, and it makes us much more powerful to actually be that country. That is how we win the hearts and minds of people who we never specifically address, because they can look and see who we are. China does the exact opposite. You can see. If they can cheat you, they will. Okay. Now when they come and ask you for friendship, why are you going to give it to them?
All right, let's do a quick lightning fun round, because I think people want to get to know you a little bit better. First country you would visit as president, and why?
China, because it's our most important relationship.
First foreign leader you would welcome at the White House?
Right now, I'd say Angela Merkel.
How come?
Because I believe that she is the person who is the leader of the free world because Donald Trump has given up on that title, and it's important to cement that that's who we are.
If you could have dinner with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be?
Jesus.
Why?
Foundation of thought. The value-driven person who didn't have a big military budget.
Didn't. Nope.
Didn't do any of the things you're suggesting, but actually, because of standing up for what was right, had a ripple effect 2,000 years later. Who even remembers who King Herod was, except he was the SOB who Jesus had to overcome? Had a big defense budget, huge defense budget, got nothing done.
Okay, this is where we might get into the singing portion. First concert you ever went to?
I think the first concert I ever went to was at the Fillmore East.
Okay.
I was probably 11, and I went to hear a band that my big brother liked called Mountain.
Mountain, I've never heard of it.
Exactly
Mine was
my
Air
point.
Supply.
Let me say that the first one I think anyone would ever heard of is I went to my cousin's wedding in Los Angeles, and it was, I think they called them the Grateful Dead.
Oh, well, maybe afterwards we could sing
And
a
my
few.
mother
I'm a deadhead a bit, and
My
I
mother
know
picked me up in a car midway through, and I was the only person in the entire stadium who wasn't high.
If you were, now is the time to say it.
I know.
Favorite band?
The person I listen to the most is probably Aretha.
Okay.
I mean, obviously she's dead and she's not a band, but if you're asking me
Every
what
time
I
that
really
I wake
love,
up, I put on my makeup.
There's so many songs. There's a movie about Aretha in
R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
1970. No, there's so many songs.
All right, we'll get to that after.
Greatest gospel singer ever.
What is your favorite thing to cook?
To cook? Listen, probably my favorite meal
Okay.
is a medium well cheeseburger with a salad. That's honestly my favorite meal.
It has a bun, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheeseburger.
Cheeseburger. Okay. Fun fact about you that nobody knows.
I don't know if this is fun,
Okay.
but I'm trying to climb all the 14,000-foot mountains in my home state of California.
Okay.
Of which there are 15, of which I've climbed either 10 or 11. And the last of them, about half of them are technical. And of the ones that are left, 3/4 of them are technical. So
Okay.
you have to stay strong.
Okay. Well, stay strong and good luck. Tom
Thank
Steyer,
you.
thanks very
Elise,
much
thank you
for
for having
joining
me.
us. Thank you.
Pleasure.